Whether intended or not, it would be a poison pill, would kill the legislation if it were adopted. We need to move this important legislation forward, as the administration notes in its statement of policy, and therefore I urge my colleagues, when we have an opportunity to vote on the Feinstein Amendment, to vote against it and to support the legislation as filed.
Morning business is closed. Under the previous order, the Senate will resume consideration of S-23, which the clerk will report.
Calendar number 6, S-23, a bill to amend Title 35, United States Code, to provide for patent reform.
Mr. President.
Senator from Vermont is recognized.
Mr. President, I understand we have the Feinstein Amendment number 133 at the desk. I ask unanimous consent that Feinstein Amendment number 133 be modified with the changes that are at the desk.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I want to thank the distinguished senator from Arizona for his words here this morning. He was part of the small group of Republicans and Democrats who have worked very, very hard over the last couple of years on this bill with the idea of giving us something that would allow inventors, innovators, entrepreneurs in America to be able to compete with the rest of the world. I'm one American who feels we can compete with anybody, anywhere, provided we got a level playing field. And other countries will set up enough barriers to us of their own. We shouldn't be setting up barriers here in the United States. And one thing we can do is to take a major, long overdue change to the patent legislation and give us that level playing field. Inventors and innovators in America will take advantage of this. We'll be better off for it, and we'll create jobs, but most importantly, we'll show the rest of the world America's open for business. America can do America's business. America can be the innovators that they've been from the time the first patent was issued. And I say with pride to a Vermonter, back in the day where the then Secretary of State, Thomas Jefferson, reviewed the application. It was then signed by the President of the United States, George Washington. The heirs of that Vermonter wish they had the copy of the original. It'd be worth a tad right now, but probably more than the invention was worth. But now, of course, they're not reviewed by the Secretary of State and signed by the President. Thank goodness there's over 700,000 pending. We need legislation to bring that up to date. And this act will promote innovation. It will create new businesses. As a result, new jobs. This is bipartisan legislation that will allow inventors to secure their patents more quickly, have better success commercializing them. Now, the pending amendment, of course, basically would gut the bill. All due respect, it would destroy all the work that we tried to do in this bill. It would eliminate a major piece of this effort, the transition to a first inventor to file patent system. First inventor to file is a necessary component of this legislation. It enjoys support from every corner of the patent community. The administration, the Secretary of Commerce, the head of the Patent and Trademark Office, they all oppose this amendment. A vast array of individual, independent, small investors, small businesses, labor oppose this amendment. The 4 senior Republicans on the Judiciary Committee have worked so hard on this bill. Senators Grassley, Hatch, Kyle, and Sessions oppose this amendment. Needless to say, Mr. President, I oppose this amendment. The amendment would gut the reforms intended by the bill. It would, of course, be a poison pill to these legislative reform efforts. Supporters of the legislation before us, ranging from high-tech and life sciences companies to universities and small businesses, place such a high importance on the transition to first inventor to file system that many of them including those who reside in just about every state, would not support a bill without those provisions. A vote in support of this amendment, which would strike first inventor to file provision, is effectively a vote against the heart of the America Invents Act, is effectively a vote to kill the act. A transition to first inventor to file has been part of this bill since its introduction 4 Congresses ago. Yet until very recently, first inventor to file was never the subject of even a single amendment in the Judiciary Committee over all those years. This legislation is a product of 8 Senate hearings, 3 markups spanning weeks of consideration, numerous amendments. Never was first inventor to file a contentious issue. Now, some well-financed special interests that do not support the America Invents Act have decided to try to kill the bill by a last-minute campaign to strike these vital provisions. And I urge senators to support the goals of the America Invents Act to vote against this amendment to strike first inventor to file. Mr. President, the United States is the only industrialized country still using a first-to-invent system, and there's a reason for that. A first inventor to file system, by contrast, with a priority of a right to a patent is based on the earlier filed application, adds simplicity and objectivity into a very complex system. By contrast, our current outdated method for determining the priority right to patent is extraordinarily complex. It's subjective. It's time-intensive. It's expensive. The old system almost always favors the larger corporation, the deep pockets, over the small, independent inventor. This past weekend, the Washington Post editorial board endorsed the transition. They called our first inventor to file standard a, quote, bright line. And they went ahead and said that it would bring certainty to the process. The editorial also rightly recognizes the protections for academics to share their ideas with outside colleagues or preview them in public seminars that are included in the bill. The transition to first inventor to file system will benefit small inventors and inventors of all sizes by creating certainty. Once a patent is granted, an inventor can rely on his filing date on the face of the patent. Now, if you have a patent, you want to raise capital, you want to grow your business, you want to create jobs, and you're going to use the patent when you go out to investors and say, here's the patent I have, they're going to say, how do you know that's a patent that we're going to be able to rely on? You can answer, because it was a first to file. And then, instead of having maybe years of litigation and complexity, you can go for it. And the reduction in cost of patent applications that comes with a transition to the system should also help the small, independent inventor. In the outdated current system, where more than one application claiming the same invention is filed, the priority of a right to a patent is decided through an interference proceeding to determine which applicant can be declared to have invented the claimed invention first. It's lengthy. It's complex. It can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Small inventors rarely, if ever, win interference proceedings. In a first inventor to file system, however, the filing date of the application is objective. It's easy to determine. It results in a streamlined and less costly process. The bill protects against the concerns of many small inventors and universities by including a one-year grace period to ensure the inventor's own publication or disclosure cannot be used against them as prior art, but will act as prior art against another patent application. This encourages early disclosure of new inventions, regardless of whether the inventor ends up trying to patent the invention. The transition to first inventor to file is also needed to help American companies and innovators compete globally. As business and competition increasingly operate on a worldwide scale, inventors have to file patent applications in both the United States and other countries for protection of their inventions. After all, Mr. President, all of us realize that we are an interconnected world. And when you go to invent something, you want to sell something, you obviously think of global markets, but you also think of global competitors. It's a reality. It's a reality of today. And since America's current outdated system differs from the first inventor to file system used in other patent issuing jurisdictions, all our competitors, it causes confusions and inefficiencies for American companies and innovators. Harmonization will benefit American inventors. Commerce Secretary Gary Locke highlighted the importance of the first inventor to file provisions to the bill in his column published in The Hill yesterday. He noted that, quote, it would be good for U.S. businesses, providing a more transparent and cost-effective process that puts them on a level playing field with their competitors around the world, close quote. Secretary Locke, who tries to make sure that we can create jobs in America to compete with the rest of the world, points out how necessary this is. He went on to confront the erroneous notion that the current outdated system is better for small and independent vendors. He did it head-on by explaining his strong opinion that the opposite is true. The first inventor-to-file system is better for the small and independent vendor. So the Secretary noted the cost of proving that one was first to invent is prohibitive, requires detailed and complex documentation of the invention process. In cases where there is a dispute about who the actual inventor is, typically it costs at least $400,000 in legal fees, even more if the case is appealed. By comparison, establishing a filing date through a provisional application, establishing priority invention costs just $110, close quote. Mr. President, if I was a small inventor and I thought I had something worthwhile, and I thought something I'd apply for a patent, I'm faced with proving that it's my invention by spending $110,000 or more than $400,000, this Vermonter can do the math pretty quickly. I know which I'd prefer. And Secretary Locke explained how the 125,000 provisional applications currently filed each year prove that early filing dates protect the rights of small inventors. And he reiterated that during the past 7 years, under the current, outdated, cumbersome, and expensive system, of almost 3 million applications filed, only one patent was granted to an individual inventor who was the second to file. That's why our reform legislation enjoys such broad support. I've already mentioned some of these supporters, but let me highlight a few more. Just yesterday, the National Association of Manufacturers urged every senator to oppose the effort to strike the first-to-file transition. They wrote, the National Association of Manufacturers supports transition in the United States from a first-to-invent system to a first-to-file system to eliminate unnecessary costs and complexity in the U.S. patent system, close quote. The Small Business and Entrepreneurship Council has expressed its strong support for the first inventor-to-file system, writing that small firms will in no way be disadvantaged. Opportunities in the international market will expand. The Intellectual Property Owners Association calls the first inventor-to-file system central to modernization and simplification of patent law, and very widely supported by U.S. companies. Independent inventor Louis Foreman has said the first inventor to file transition will help independent inventors across the country by strengthening the current system for entrepreneurs and small businesses. 6 university, medical college, and higher education associations have urged the transition to first to file, saying it will add greater clarity to the U.S. system. And urging the transition to the first to file system, the Association for Competitive Technology, which represents small and mid-sized IT firms, has said the current outdated system negatively impacts entrepreneurs, puts American inventors at a disadvantage with competitors abroad who can implement first inventor to file standards. Just think about that. We keep this outdated system, we're at a competitive disadvantage with those people we're trying to win out or to win over in other countries. We ought to be thinking of what puts America on a level playing field instead of holding America back and giving the advantage to other countries. That's why it's so important to move to a first inventor to file system. I ask consent that copies of the Washington Post editorial patenting innovation be included in the record at the conclusion of my remarks.
Is there objection? So ordered.
And I also ask, Mr. President, that letters from the National Association of Manufacturers, Higher Education Association, the Small Business Entrepreneurship Council be placed in the record at the close of my comments.
Without objection, so ordered.
I thank the Chair, and I'll conclude with this. If we want to maintain our position at the forefront of the world's economy, and right now it is a real battle to include our position there, we are to continue to lead the globe in innovation and production, and again, a position that is threatened. If we are to win the future through American ingenuity innovation, then we must have a patent system that's streamlined and efficient. The American Invents Act and the transition to a first inventor to file system in particular are crucial to fulfilling this promise. I urge all senators on both sides of the aisle to oppose the Feinstein Amendment and support the important provision of first inventor to file at the heart of the American Invents Act. And I said I would submit the list of stakeholders across the spectrum from high-tech and life science to university inventors in support the transition of first to file system, and ask consent that that list be part of the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
And, Mr. President, I see the distinguished senator from Delaware who has been so helpful in this on the floor, and so I will yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The senator from Delaware is recognized.
Thank you, and my thanks to the chairman for his leadership on this floor deliberation regarding S-23, the America Invents Act. I rise to speak in opposition to the Feinstein Amendment, which would strike the first-to-file provision that I think is one of the critical components of this act that will harmonize the American patent system with the rest of the world. As you heard Chairman Leahy speak to, this is a critical feature of this reform bill. This is the first comprehensive patent reform bill in 60 years. It is a key piece of our bipartisan work to make sure that the United States remains a competitive country which can once again be at the forefront of world innovation. As someone who, like you, Mr. President, is concerned about manufacturing, is concerned about employment, is concerned about jobs, I think one of the ways we can re-strengthen, reinvigorate, re-energize manufacturing in this country is by making sure that our Patent and Trademark Office is as capable, is as strong as it can possibly be. And I take quite seriously that the Patent and Trademark Office, under the very able leadership of Director Kapos, is opposed to this amendment and would also has also raised concern, which I share, that this amendment would tear apart the very broad coalition that has worked so hard and has negotiated this particular act, the American Invents Act, over the last 6 years. On an issue that is as important as this, as critical as this to the protection of American innovation and the resulting creation of jobs, I think it is important that we in the Senate not allow this bipartisan bill to fall apart over this issue. The transition to first-to-file is an improvement over the current system because it provides increased predictability, certainty, and transparency. Patent priority will depend on the date of public disclosures and the effective filing date, rather than on inventor notebooks, secret personal files, which may or may not be admissible and often leads to long and contentious and expensive litigation, as the chairman mentioned in his floor comments as well. This predictability, the predictability that the first-to-file system will bring, I believe will strengthen the hand of inventors, investors, and the public, all of whom will know as soon as an application is filed whether it is likely to have priority over other patent applications. In contrast, the current system with which we've worked for many, many years does not provide an easy way to determine priority. And that's why interference proceedings can be so contentious, so long, and so expensive. There are some innovators, some inventors, some small inventors in particular, who I know are concerned that first-to-file will be used by larger companies to steal away their rightful inventions. This bill contains critical protections for all inventors so that the ultimate new system, once this is passed, will be more fair, more predictable, and transparent for all. For those inventors who publicly disclose an invention before anybody else, they have a one-year grace period to claim priority for any patent application based on the subject matter which they disclosed. Smaller inventors as well as large inventors would be protected as soon as they publish or disclose under this America Invents Act. And in my view, that will increase the free flow of ideas while still protecting the IP rights of any inventor, large or small. The Patent and Trademark Office commissioned a study of patent applications filed over the past 7 years. They found that only 1 in 300,000 filings would, under the new system, grant a patent to a large company that otherwise might have gone to a small company or an individual inventor. By avoiding the cost, the difficulty, the unpredictability of lengthy interference proceedings, transitioning to first-to-file will neutralize what I think is a big structural advantage to large companies in the current dispute system. First-to-file also gives the holder of a new patent increased confidence in the strength and reliability of this patent, which I also think will accelerate venture capital investment, new company formation, and movement towards deployment of critical new technology. I think that experience has shown in other countries, in Europe and Canada, that transitioning from a first-to-invent to first-to-file system will not lead directly to an increase in so-called junk applications and will instead make patent examination simpler, fairer, and more predictable. In short, Mr. President, my view is that it is crucial to this legislation for its success. It is crucial for the coalition that has come together over many years to support it. It is crucial for the progress that this act will make in strengthening and streamlining the patent review and granting process here in the United States. And so I urge my colleagues to oppose Senate Amendment 133. With that, I suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
The Senate returns to a quorum call. The underlying business today is a continued debate on the overhaul of the patent law. Over in the U.S. House, meanwhile, today, they are debating a bill dealing with small business reporting requirements as part of the health care law, and votes expected around 1:30 or 2 in the U.S. House. You can follow that on C-SPAN. Vice President Biden is coming up to Capitol Hill today to talk about the budget, fiscal year 2011 budget. The continuing resolution was passed yesterday in the Senate. The President signed it late yesterday. The Vice President today will meet with congressional leaders. According to a Democratic aide, the Congressional Quarterly says that the Vice President will meet with Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, Mitch McConnell, the Minority Leader, House Speaker John Boehner, and the House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi. Also coming up with Vice President Biden, the President's Chief of Staff, William Daley, and Jacob Lew. Again, that meeting set for Capitol Hill about 4 p.m. Eastern.
The senator from Colorado is recognized.
Is the Senate in a quorum call?
It is.
I would ask that the quorum call be issued.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I'd like to speak briefly on the importance of passing the America Invents Act. Chairman Leahy and the Judiciary Committee have worked hard to put this product on the floor that will mark the biggest reforms to our patent system in 60 years. This bill will create jobs in Colorado and across the country by promoting innovation. By making our patent system more efficient, we are building the foundation for future economic growth. In my state alone, nearly 20,000 patent applications have been granted between the years 2000 and 2009. These applications have created the foundation for our clean energy economy and emerging tech and bio industries. Having a high-quality U.S. patent and trademark office is essential to maintaining American leadership in innovation. The America Invents Act will help us grow new industries and will help cure the backlog and delay that has stunted the ability of inventors to patent their ideas. Right now, the average pendency period for a patent application is 36 months. That is completely unacceptable if we are to compete with the rest of the world. This doesn't even account for those patents that have been tied up in years of litigation after they are granted. And we've improved the bill on the floor by helping solidify alternatives to litigation, provide for more efficient resolution of disputes, and help create more certainty. which is essential to inventors. It's hard to pass a jobs bill without spending money, but that's absolutely what we've done here. This bill does a good job of balancing the interests of innovators across the many sectors of our economy. And we've passed a number of bipartisan amendments that have improved this bill. We added amendments promoting the establishment of satellite USPTO offices in regions all across the country, creating a discount for small entities to participate in the accelerated patent examination program of the Patent and Trademark Office, and addressing concerns with damages and venue provisions. I'm proud to have worked with the chairman and the ranking member to get these issues resolved. I also want to commend Senator Menendez on his amendment to provide a fast track for patents that are critical for our national competitiveness, which I co-sponsored. The Senate has come a long way toward improving our patent system with this legislation and harmonizing our system with the rest of the world. There are a lot of people in my state who are interested in further improvements, and I pledge to continue to work with them to make sure we continue to fine-tune this legislation where we can. The American Invents Act represents significant progress for our patent system. We are moving our patent system into the new century, which is already being defined by the next wave of American innovation. The breadth of support for this legislation across industries and from large and small businesses, as well as our universities, has provided the momentum to complete this work. I'd like to close again by thanking the Chairman and the Judiciary Committee. I urge my colleagues to vote for patent reform. Thank you, Mr. President, and I yield the floor. I note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
President, I ask the quorum call be...
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. President, I have 7 unanimous consent requests for committees to meet during today's session of the Senate. They have the approval of the majority and minority leaders. I ask unanimous consent that these requests be agreed to and that these requests be printed in the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. President, I note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
recognized as if in morning.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. President, thank you. Mr. President, this morning the Republican leader came to the floor, Senator McConnell, and made some pretty strong and sweeping statements about the state of the deficit and responsibility, and I'd like to have a chance to respond. Senator McConnell said for 2 years now, Washington Democrats have taken fiscal recklessness to new heights. The amount of red egg Democrats plan to rack up this year alone would exceed all the debt run up by the federal government since its inception through 1984. Mr. President, I'd like to set the record straight. Understand what the national debt of America was when President William Jefferson Clinton left office. We were running surpluses. We hadn't done that for decades. Surpluses in the federal treasury. Well, what did we do with all this money? We put it in the Social Security Trust Fund. We bought more longevity and solvency for Social Security. And if you remember, the economy was never stronger. William Jefferson Clinton left office, and at that moment in time, the national debt, the accumulated debt of America from George Washington until he left office, $5 trillion. Remember that number? $5 trillion. Fast forward 8 years after the end of President George W. Bush, 8 years later, where were we? The national debt was now $12 trillion. Fiscal recklessness by Democrats. Under President Bush, the national debt more than doubled. And instead of leaving a surplus for President Obama, he said, welcome to an economy that is hemorrhaging, hundreds of thousands of jobs lost every single month, and we anticipate next year's deficit, he told President Obama, to be $1.2 trillion. That was what President Bush handed to President Obama. Now, I don't mind a selective view of history. I guess we're all guilty of that to some extent. But to ignore the fiscal mess created that more than doubled the national debt in 8 years, to ignore that we waged 2 wars without paying for them, to ignore that we cut taxes in the midst of a war, which is something no president in the history of the United States has ever done, is to ignore reality. And the reality is we are here today in the midst of this titanic struggle about whether we are going to continue to keep the federal government functioning. We are really being asked whether or not 2 weeks from now we want to have security at our airports, air traffic controllers, whether or not we want to have Social Security checks sent out, people actually sending the checks, answering questions at the Internal Revenue Service, whether we want the Securities and Exchange Commission still working on Wall Street 2 weeks from now. We cannot lurch 2 weeks at a time forward without doing a great disservice to taxpayers of this country, as well as to the people, the men and women who work hard for our government every single day. Now, what is the answer in the House of Representatives? Well, the House of Representatives says we need to cut $100 billion this year. They started at $60 billion, incidentally, and then decided that wasn't enough for bragging rights. Let's get up to $100 billion this year. And you say, well, out of a budget of $3.7 trillion, how big is that? Whoa, they didn't look at the budget of $3.7 trillion. They looked at one 14% slice of the pie. Domestic discretionary spending. That's it. Nothing to be taken out of the Department of Defense, nothing to be taken away in terms of tax breaks for the wealthiest corporations, the most successful corporations, nothing out of the oil and gas royalties and the like, nothing out of that. We'll take it all out of domestic discretionary. So what did they take away? I'll tell you what they took away. I looked in my state last week. I went up to Woodstock, Illinois, and we have an office open there with counselors who are bringing in unemployed people, sitting them down in front of computers with fax machines and copy machines and phones and counselors. They're preparing their resumes and they're trying to get back to work. These are not lazy people. They're people who want to work, and they need a helping hand. And this place has been successful. It places people in these jobs. What would happen to that office under the House Republican budget resolution? It would close its doors. More unemployed people, more unemployment checks. Is that the answer to putting America's economy back on its feet? Is that how we're going to get 15 million Americans back to work? Or how about the House Republicans' proposal to eliminate $850 a year in Pell Grants? Senator Leahy, you know what that's all about. These are kids from the poorest families in America, many of them for the first time in their family have a chance to graduate from college, but they can't make it. They don't have enough money. We give them a helping hand, and the Republicans take it away. What will it do? Well, the president of Augustana College in Rock Island, Illinois, told me what it meant. It meant that 5%, 1 out of every 20 students, would go home and not finish the school year. That's what the House Republican cut means. To cut job training, to cut education. When we have 15 million people out of work, what are they thinking? Not bad enough. I went to a medical school in my hometown of Springfield, Southern Illinois University School of Medicine. We're so proud of it, and met with the researchers. They get a few $1 million each year to do medical research in fields of cancer therapy, dealing with heart issues, dealing with the complaints of veterans who are returning. What do the House Republicans do? They virtually close down the research for the remainder of the year. Close down medical research. Is that right? Is that what we want in America? Have you ever had a sick person in your family and you went to the doctor and you said, "Doctor, is there anything? Is there a drug? Is there something, experimental, clinical trial? Is there anything?" Have you ever asked that question? If you did, then you know that this cut by the House Republicans is mindless. To cut medical research at this moment in history? And then I went to the National Laboratory, Argonne National Laboratory, on Monday. What do they do there? You know, a lot of people couldn't answer that question. Well, I learned specifically. Are you aware of the Chevy Volt, this new breakthrough automobile, all-electric automobile? Where did that battery come from in this automobile? The Argonne National Laboratory. How about the latest pharmaceutical breakthroughs? Virtually every one of them uses the advanced photon source at the Argonne National Laboratory. I met a man from Eli Lilly who was there experimenting with a new drug that can save lives at this laboratory. And how about computers? Where's the fastest computer in the world today? I wish it were in the United States. It's in China. China. We are now working on the next fastest computer so we don't lose that edge. Where? At the Argonne National Laboratory. So what would the House Republican budget do to that laboratory and most every other laboratory? It would eliminate 1/3 of the scientists and support staff working there and cut their research by 50% for the rest of the year. So what? So if we don't move these pharmaceuticals forward to market sooner to save lives, if we don't compete with the Chinese on this computer, if we don't deal with battery technology so that we don't lose that edge in the world, what will it mean? Lost jobs. The House Republicans weren't thinking clearly. They were performing brain surgery with a hacksaw. And as a result, they've cut things that are essential for the future of America. Infrastructure projects, education, research. And now to have the Republican leader come and tell us we've got to accept that. That's the future of America. No, it's not. Time and again, when we sit down to deal with the budget challenges, whether it's in the Deficit Commission, which I was honored to serve on, or whether it's in past negotiations, we open this table up to all federal spending, not just a 14%, that tiny slice of a pie. Senator McConnell can remember, and I can too. Under President George Herbert Walker Bush and under President Clinton, we put on the table these tax breaks for some of these oil companies and corporations and said, is it really worth America's future for us to give them a tax break or to use the money to reduce the deficit? That's an honest question. Mandatory spending. All of these things need to be brought to the table for conversation. But that's not the position of the Republicans. They would rather see us shut down the government than to open this conversation to the entire federal budget. They would rather see us shut down the government than fight to make sure that education, training, research and innovation and infrastructure are there to build a strong American economy for the future. I would say to my friend, Senator McConnell from Kentucky, we don't need any speeches from that side of the aisle about a national debt that more than doubled under the last Republican president. We've got to work together in a bipartisan way, acknowledging the reality of history, that we all have had a hand in reaching the point we are today, both positive and negative points where we are today, and we all need to take a responsible position to move us forward. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The senior senator from Vermont is recognized.
Mr. President, I appreciate the comments of the senator from Illinois. I recall the great discussions and I happen to have liked President Reagan. We got along very well, but I remember his discussions on a balanced budget and all that as his budget tripled the national debt. I do recall he did veto one spending bill because it didn't spend as much as he wanted. So, you know, rhetoric is one thing. As the senator from Illinois points out, reality is often different. So I thank him. Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that at 12:30 p.m. the Senate proceed to a vote in relation to the Feinstein Amendment number 133 as modified, with no intervening action or debate. The time until then be divided equally between the proponents and the opponents, and no amendments be in order to the Feinstein Amendment prior to the vote.
Is there objection? So ordered.
And, Mr. President, I suggest the absence of quorum, the time equally divided.
Without objection, so ordered. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
You need this.
Waiting for senators to come to the floor to speak. Quorum call underway as the Senate debates the patent overhaul bill today. Meanwhile, over in the U.S. House, they are debating a bill that deals with the small business reporting requirements in the health care law. Matter of fact, House Republican leaders are speaking about that bill now, holding a news conference, and that's live on C-SPAN 3. Later today, Vice President Biden is coming to Capitol Hill to begin negotiations over how to move forward on the fiscal year 2011 spending. According to CQ, he'll be meeting with the leaders of the House and Senate, Mitch McConnell and Harry Reid, Speaker John Boehner, and House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi. He's also coming up with the President's Chief of Staff, William Daley, and the Budget Director, Jacob Lew. That meeting is scheduled to be at 4 p.m. Eastern. We'll get a Democratic perspective on that, too, as Nancy Pelosi and other Democratic leaders will be speaking to reporters shortly, about 5 minutes or so at noon Eastern, and look for that on C-SPAN 3 as well.